Elon Musk sat in the chair in the studio, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him, penetrating and expectant. This was no ordinary interview. This time, he wasn't dealing with journalists, but an entire audience ready to dive into the heart of technology, politics, and human beliefs. He was ready to explain why his actions sparked so much controversy. The interview would shock everyone who expected the usual calm, well-thought-out answers. The interviewer, a young woman named Katie, sat across from him with a notebook in hand, ready to start the conversation. However, her questions were not at all what Musk had anticipated. "Elon, we know you're a person who often stirs debate, but today let's talk about your ambitions for Mars colonization," Katie began, looking at him with an unreadable expression. Her voice was neither friendly nor critical, but rather curious, as if she were trying to capture something more. "My goal is for humanity to become a multi-planetary species," Musk replied, but his voice sounded less certain than usual. He couldn't help but notice how the microphone captured every movement and word. Katie stared at him, her eyes lighting up. "But don't you think you're trying to create some ideal future that not everyone understands or can accept? Couldn't it come across as a luxury only available to a few, while the rest are left behind?" Elon felt his heart rate pick up slightly. Katie's question cut right to the core of his beliefs. His gaze became firm, and he sat up a bit, wiping his forehead with his hand. "I'm not trying to create a perfect world," he said calmly, but there was tension in his voice. "I'm trying to create opportunities. If we don't move forward, we'll stop. And that applies not just to Mars, but to all of our progress." Katie tilted her head, pondering. She wasn't quick to criticize, but now she was eager to see if Elon Musk could handle a wave of questions that weren't so easy. However, not everyone shares the same vision. Some believe that your business strategy places human life second. Do you see people as a resource for achieving your goals, don't you? Do you understand that there are people who say your actions only deepen social divides? These words hit Musk like a blow to the chest. He could feel that this wasn't just a question, it was a test of endurance. Millions of counterarguments raced through his mind, but none could immediately respond to such a strong challenge. "People aren't a resource," he said, his gaze sharp. "People are the foundation of everything. I work to create opportunities for anyone who wants to take advantage of them." Katie paused, her gaze intense. "And yet, how do you respond to those who believe that it's because of your technologies that big corporations gain excessive power while small businesses suffer? How do you feel in this context?" Elon went silent. His face grew serious, and his gaze became unfocused. These questions were painful because they were true for many. Musk knew that his companies and actions could be seen as part of a system that allowed the biggest players to get even bigger, while the weaker ones fell further behind. "I don't agree with that view," he began, but this time his words lacked their usual confidence. "I work on innovations, and my goal is to create a competitive environment. We're moving forward, and that opens new opportunities for everyone." There was still one more crucial moment, one key point that was hard to hold on to in such a conversation. Katie made another move. She looked him straight in the eyes as she asked the final question that pushed him to his limits. "And how do you respond to those who believe that you're simply deceiving them with promises that your technologies will bring more benefit than harm?" Musk went silent. He didn't answer right away. He knew that this question wasn't just hard for him. It reflected the tension between those who followed his ideas and those who doubted them. "Sometimes I think they just don't understand that all these technologies have the potential to change the world," he replied, but his voice wasn't as firm as usual. It was an attempt to understand how all of this works. The camera lingered on his expression for a few seconds. The studio was silent, and everyone in the room could feel how much remained unresolved, unspoken. Katie didn't say another word. She just looked at him. The interview ended, but the mass of questions, doubts, and suspicions hung in the air. Now, it all depended on how Elon Musk would continue to approach his controversial ideas and whether he could find new paths for development that would amaze everyone. Elon sat in the studio, his gaze no longer as confident as it had been before. All these questions, to which he was accustomed to giving quick, clear answers, now hung in the air like unanswered riddles. The studio had grown even more cramped, though still neutral. The camera continued to capture every one of his reactions. Everyone present couldn't help but notice how difficult these answers were for him. Katie sat before him, her eyes keenly studying every movement of his lips. She knew her questions were only the beginning. Now her goal wasn't just to conduct a typical interview, but to stir emotions that Elon Musk usually went to great lengths to hide. She knew these emotions were tearing him apart inside. You talk about how your technologies are helping humanity. But have you ever considered that they could be going against the very people they're supposed to serve? Katie asked, her voice becoming even more firm and penetrating. Projects like Starlink or Tesla put privacy at risk, controlling personal lives. This isn't just about ambition. This is a massive influence on the lives of millions. Don't you fear that ultimately your companies will be the ones ruling the world? Elon felt his heart start to race again. This question was harsh, but he couldn't deny that Katie had touched on a real issue. He wasn't used to this kind of challenge. His usually clenched drive towards goals was now becoming a stone breaking apart his inner calm. "I don't control the world," he replied, but his words no longer carried the same certainty. They sounded more like a defense. "I'm trying to give people more opportunities so they have control over their own lives. This isn't about power, it's about freedom." But Katie didn't stop there. She knew that was only half the truth. Elon Musk might talk about freedom, but his technologies didn't always allow people to be free in their choices. "Freedom?" she asked, almost defiantly. "How can there be freedom when you monopolize access to information, when your companies begin controlling every aspect of human existence? Don't you feel responsible to stop all this before it becomes worse than the worst corporations from the past?" Katie was unwavering. She knew these questions could take the situation to a new level. She wasn't afraid to provoke Elon because that was the essence of her job, to dig deeper than others. And every next step she took was even harder for Musk. Elon felt his chest tighten. These questions made him realize that many people didn't see his projects as anything but a danger. His technologies, his innovations, which he often called the salvation of humanity, now made him understand that they were just part of a much more complicated picture, one that he himself might not fully see. "I believe in technology," he said finally, trying to regain control. "And I believe it can be used for the greater good. It's difficult, and yes, there are many moments when we need to be cautious. But it's the only way to move forward." Katie, without hesitation, interrupted him. "Don't you fear that your belief in technology is turning into belief in yourself? You don't want to become that person who says, 'I know better than everyone,' do you? Aren't you afraid that all this could spiral out of control? Because it looks like you're monopolizing ideas and actions that could truly change the world." Elon fell silent. Every word Katie had said was spot on. All these years, he had strived to make big changes. But was his goal truly freedom for all, or just the creation of a new system of control? An uncomfortable calm filled the room. Elon felt himself drawn into the very trap he was trying to avoid. His own beliefs had become an obstacle to his sense of freedom. He couldn't answer because doubt had begun to seat itself in his soul. But Katie didn't stop. She looked at him, her eyes even sharper, and almost whispered, "Yes, you want to change the world. But doesn't it seem like you're not capable of handling such changes? Technology is just a tool, and whoever controls these tools controls humanity. Are you ready to let go of control when you know how easy it would be to do so?" Elon Musk felt his inner world shatter. He had no prepared answer. Elon stood, stunned, unable to respond immediately. Katie paused, her eyes never leaving him. She was waiting, like a predator ready for the final lunge that would test his resolve. "What's next, Elon?" Her voice was calm, but beneath it lay an unbreakable determination. "You want to create a better world? And for whom are you creating it? For people? For yourself? Or maybe for those who are willing to pay the most to buy control?" Elon took a step back, feeling how each of her words penetrated deeper into his consciousness. He was a man of action, accustomed to taking responsibility for his actions. But now this conflict, this tension, was not just about technology. It was about his moral compass. Each project, each new launch, had become a test in which he wasn't always sure he was on the right path. Katie took another step, moving so close that Elon felt her cold gaze piercing the very essence of his beliefs. "You started with the idea of a better world, but when you gain all this power, you become the one who is hated for destroying other possibilities. The technologies you develop could subjugate human freedom under the guise of progress. Millions of people try to trust you, but are you ready to answer for the consequences? For how every one of your ideas could turn into a trap for those who blindly accept it." Elon felt his mind return to the beginning, when he first started, when every launch was not just an innovation, but an attempt to change the world. But now, as he looked at the whole picture, he began to feel afraid. "Do you think I don't understand where I'm headed?" He finally stopped, meeting her gaze. "I'm not trying to change the world just for the sake of it. I want to give people the chance to live better, faster, without limitations. And I know that technology carries risks. But that's why I put everything into controlling it." Katie didn't back down. "Control? Do you really think that's possible? Do you think you have control? Elon, you're just trying to hold a monolith that's about to crumble. You can't stop evolution. And you, yourself, may have already become part of that evolution, without realizing that it's not you controlling it. It's controlling you." These words struck like a thunderbolt. Elon felt his chest tighten again. Today's interview was more than just a question about the future of technology. It had become a battle within himself, a battle that couldn't be won with arguments or cold logic alone. "And you want me to give up what I believe in?" Elon asked, his voice becoming firmer, but with a hint of weakness. "You want me to surrender? To stop moving forward? To stop creating a new future?" Katie paused again, her eyes filled not just with aggression, but with genuine disappointment. "No, Elon. I want you to stop and look at what you're creating. I want you to look at the people you want to make happy. And ask yourself, are they happy when their lives become part of a massive machine where everything is calculated, where they have no choice? You want to control the future? But that's not your right." The tension in the studio was mounting, and it seemed like everyone present could feel it with every word. Elon tried to gather his thoughts, but all he felt was uncertainty. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I'm doing this to save humanity, so we don't fall behind." Katie took a step back, as if giving him space for his final argument. But her next question was soft, yet it pierced to the very heart of the matter. "Isn't it you who has left all of us behind, Elon?" Elon didn't answer immediately. Her words penetrated deep, and he felt his heart tighten with tension. What if she's right? What if his own struggle for progress is becoming exactly what he was trying to avoid, nothing more than manipulation of people who don't even realize their lives are no longer their own? But he couldn't allow that. He couldn't go back. "I'm not leaving people behind," he said quietly but firmly. His voice didn't sound as confident as he hoped, but he continued, "I'm giving them an opportunity. The opportunity to live better, faster, more efficiently. The opportunity to push beyond what was possible before. And I'm not going to stop." Katie, however, didn't seem convinced. Her gaze was cold, but there was no hatred in it, only deep disappointment. "You're not listening, Elon. This isn't about technology. It's not about opportunities. It's about the people you're leaving behind, even when you think you're saving them. Every step you take, every new product, it's an attempt to change everything for profit, to become better, But you forget that a person is not a machine, not an algorithm. You can't just reprogram them. Elon felt his own arguments begin to fall apart. His hands clenched into fists, but he tried to stay calm. That's not true, Katie. I'm not reprogramming people. I'm giving them opportunities. They choose how to use them. But she didn't let him continue. That's exactly the problem. You give them a choice, but that choice has already been determined. Your technology, your achievements, they become closed loops in which people really have no choice. You say you're creating the future, but maybe it's you who's turning that future into a trap. Elon felt his palms begin to sweat again. He understood that this wasn't just a fight between him and Katie. This was a battle for everything he believed in, for what he had created, and for whether it was right. I can't go back, he said, on the verge of breaking down. I can't just leave everything behind and go back to the old way. I see it. I see what's happening. I see that people are suffering. But I believe change can be made through technology. But do the changes you propose really improve people's lives? Katie asked, her voice calm. But that calm was more dangerous than any shout. Elon lowered his head, feeling the pressure in his chest increase. All these years he had worked trying to change the world, but now he felt that this could be something bigger. This wasn't just about technology, it was about morality. I don't know, he whispered. And in that moment, Katie stepped back, her gaze softening. Elon, it's not just about who's right and who's wrong. It's about understanding why we do what we do. If we want to change the world, we need to start by understanding ourselves. And if you really want to make it better, you have to start by treating people not as tools, but as real people with real feelings and needs. Elon stood, unsure of what to say. All his resolve began to fade. What if she's right? What if he really has become blind to human needs in the pursuit of progress? The silence was broken by a voice from behind the studio curtains. Elon, you should take a break. All eyes turned to the man who had approached from behind, the producer of the interview. We need to take a break, he said, but his words sounded like a signal for Elon, a signal for him to stop, to think. Elon slowly nodded, taking a deep breath. We'll continue after the break. His voice was quiet, almost defeated. If Katie wanted to plant doubts in his mind, she succeeded. Now, he didn't know what to do next. After the break, Elon and Katie remained in the studio, separated not only by physical space, but also by the words that now hung in the air between them, like an invisible barrier. Elon felt his nerves tightening, and every movement became heavy. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. This wasn't just an interview. It was a battle, and he wasn't ready to lose. The studio was quiet. The cameras began moving again, and within a few seconds, the producer gave the signal to continue. Elon lifted his head and met Katie's gaze. She didn't look away, and there was no contempt in her eyes, which Elon was used to seeing in his opponents. It was a look full of questions, questions he couldn't and didn't want to answer. The producer signaled to continue. Elon, let's go back to your goal. You said you want to change the world. But do you know how exactly? Elon, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze on him, spoke again. But his voice was less confident than usual. I see a future where technology helps people, makes their lives better, give them new opportunities. That's my goal, not just products, but real change. A change that brings results, or a change that undermines the foundations of society? Katie asked, her voice soft but heavy. She was pressing again. Elon felt her words penetrate deeper. My products give people the chance to be better. They save time, they make life easier, Elon replied, his tone different from how he usually spoke in interviews. Now his words seemed more like an attempt to justify himself than a convincing argument. Yes, they help save time. But what about human emotion? Personal connections? What makes us human, not just units in a machine? Katie stared at him, as if waiting for an answer. Elon felt his vulnerable point exposed. All his experience in the world of technology, in business development, now felt helpless in the context of her questions. He no longer had the firmness he was so eager to display to his partners, investors, and even to himself. He began to doubt if this was really what he wanted. Had he forgotten the very people he was trying to improve? People choose for themselves how to use technology, he said. His words sounded like an excuse. And what if they choose not to use it? What if they just want to live without all these gadgets? Katie smiled, but there was no joy in her smile. It was a smile of challenge. Now, Elon understood. This conversation wasn't just about technology. It was something bigger. It was a clash of ideologies, a conflict between generations, between what is now and what could be in the future. It was like the collision of two worlds. Staying firm in his beliefs, he decided to take another step. He couldn't let Katie shake his faith. He had to hold his ground. I can't allow people to stay where they are. I can't allow us to be content with what we have now if we can make it better, faster, more efficient, he said, clenching his fists. Katie stood before him, and her gaze seemed like an evaluation of his words. And what about those who don't want this? What about those who can't keep up with you, who aren't ready to change their habits or beliefs? They'll still get a chance, Elon said, his voice sharp, though he tried to maintain calm. And if they're not ready, they'll just fall behind. Katie paused, her eyes serious, but there was no fear in her expression. She wasn't ready to back down. And that's your answer? That we should drag everyone along with us, even if they don't want to? Katie turned to the camera. Is that what you want to change? Elon felt the pressure in his chest rise again. All this time, he thought his ideas could change the world. But now, he was beginning to doubt whether he had forgotten the very essence of humanity. The silence that followed her words was deafening. It felt like the whole world was waiting for him to speak next. But even if he found the words, could he convince her? And more importantly, could he convince himself? I don't know what will happen next, he whispered, breaking the silence. But I know one thing. I will keep searching for an answer. And I won't stop. The answer remained uncertain, and even though Elon wasn't sure of his path, he didn't back down. This conversation was just the beginning. The tension in the room was palpable. Elon and Katie stood in the silence of the studio, the weight of their words hanging heavily between them. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment, but neither of them seemed to notice. The audience, unseen but present, felt the friction. Katie's gaze never left him, and for the first time, Elon could see past her questions, past her challenge. She wasn't just questioning his work. She was questioning the very foundation of what he believed. And that cut deeper than anything else. He had always been certain that technology could solve everything. It could fix people's problems, make the world more efficient. But now, standing here, facing her, he was beginning to see the cracks in his own conviction. Katie wasn't backing down. She knew how to press. She knew where the real heart of the issue lay. And it wasn't about products. It wasn't about innovation. It was about people. About values. About whether the world he was shaping was one people even wanted to live in. For a moment, Elon thought about giving up, letting go of the weight of his dreams. Maybe she was right. Maybe all the advancements he had pushed for, had been in the wrong direction. But then, something inside him flickered. He couldn't stop now. He couldn't walk away from everything he had worked for, even if it meant confronting the very things he had refused to see before. The silence stretched, both of them caught in their own thoughts. Finally, Elon broke it, his voice steady, but a new determination in his words. You're right. We're not just creating products. We're shaping the future. But I still believe in that future. People may not know what they want yet, but they will. And when they do, we'll be ready. I'll be ready. Katie nodded. Her face softened, but there was still a hint of skepticism in her eyes. You can't change the world by ignoring the people in it, Elon. Don't forget that. The camera lights dimmed slightly as the interview came to an end. The harsh glare of the studio lights faded, but the weight of their conversation lingered. As they walked off set, the once confident steps of Ilian felt slower now, more uncertain. He knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not for him, not for Katie, and not for the future they were both part of, whether they liked it or not. The studio doors closed behind them with a soft thud, the hum of the lights still echoing in Ilian's ears. Outside, the world seemed quieter, almost peaceful compared to the chaos of the interview. But his mind raced with thoughts, each one vying for attention. Katie's words lingered. They had unsettled him in a way nothing had in years. He had built his empire on the belief that progress was the only thing that mattered. Yet, the more he thought about it, the more he realized that what he had failed to see was the human cost. The people who would be left behind, the ones who couldn't keep up with the relentless march of innovation. For the first time in a long time, Ilian felt the weight of his own humanity. He was a man, not just a machine of progress. And perhaps that was the point. Perhaps it was time to stop seeing people as numbers, as data points, and start seeing them as individuals again. He walked down the corridor, the sound of his footsteps hollow against the walls. It was as if the silence around him was forcing him to reckon with the truth he had been avoiding for so long. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the moment of solitude. It was a message from his team. The investors are waiting. The next step is ready. Are you in? He stared at the message for a long time, fingers hovering over the keys. The pressure to keep moving forward, to meet expectations, was still there. But for the first time, he wondered if he was on the right path. Was it worth it? Was the future he was shaping truly the one people wanted? Before he could respond, Katie's words echoed again. You can't change the world by ignoring the people in it. He put his phone down, turning toward the large windows of the building. Outside, the city sprawled, a chaotic mixture of lives and stories, of people trying to make sense of their existence in a world that was rapidly changing around them. Ilian took a deep breath. He didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. Maybe this wasn't about being right, but about being present, listening, learning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, Ilian made a choice. He wasn't going to stop. He wasn't going to let go of his vision for the future. But he was going to change the way he approached it. For the first time, he was ready to meet the world, not just with technology, but with understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward truly changing the world.